Hi, I'm Benny.
I'm Keppie. Wait, start again, I was giggling. G'day, I'm Keppie.
I'm Benny.
We're two friends talking.
We are two friends talking.
And in this video, we wanted to share with you 5 songwriting exercises from our lives as songwriters and songwriting teachers that have been transformational in our own songwriting practices.
Life-changing.
Life-changing.
Life-changing exercise.
Should we get into it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So number 1, object writing.
Object writing is a writing exercise that I learnt in my classes at the Berklee College of Music with Pattison, who's written amazing lyric writing textbooks, including Writing Better Lyrics and Songwriting Without Boundaries, both of which describe object writing in detail. But to summarize object writing, essentially it's a 10-minute free writing exercise that is bound by the limitations of the senses. So you're given a prompt and it could be anything. Usually it starts with an object, which is why Pat calls it object writing. But you can use people, places, events, times, and eventually you can even use things like emotions. Like you could write ambition and write about ambition for 10 minutes, as long as you focus on the senses. So it's not a journal entry. It's not how you feel and think about things. It's really sense-bound writing.
And objects are nice because there's nothing at stake. You know, pick a coffee mug. I mean, no one's going to get offended. You know, nothing bad's going to happen. So you just write about the coffee mug. And I even love the idea, where this changed my life is even taking the 10 minutes and saying, let's do it in 2 minutes. And doing little batches of 2 minutes, because there is this lovely idea that if nothing comes from it, if I don't feel like it was particularly fruitful, I've given 2 minutes of my life. I can do that. I can do that many times in a day and feel good about it. But generally speaking, a lot comes from it. Yeah, for me, transformationally, it all happened when I realized I wasn't trying to describe the thing I was talking about. You know, I wasn't talking about a pencil saying it's wooden, you know, it's pointy. I wasn't just going through that kind of simplistic, childlike level of description. The joy for me in object writing comes when it takes you somewhere else. It becomes a metaphor for something else, or a launch pad, or a catalyst for this other deeper feeling, or this story that's lurking there in your memory, or this emotion that wants to come out. And really the object becomes the prompt. The object is the way into something that's far more interesting that you have to say. Number 2, no rhyme. We're talking here about songs without any internal rhyme, any end-line rhyme, no deliberate attempt to rhyme throughout the entire song.
Can you give me an example of a song like that?
There was a song that changed my world when I was younger called Jeremy by Pearl Jam from the album 10. Huge song. The grunge era was massive for me. But here was a song, and here was a band that was at the top, you know, top of their game. And here was a song that came along that I didn't even realize had no rhyme until like 10 years later when I started learning about rhyme scheme. But what drew me in was this incredibly heartfelt story about, you know, a classroom and bullying, and the imagery and the emotion of the scene really stuck with me. And it was only later that I looked at it and went, wow, that's a beautiful piece of storytelling that was not at all relying on rhyme to carry any of that emotion. It was really just an immersive, engaging story. So I think a really simple exercise is to take one thing that you really want to talk about, just one idea. It can be really simple. And your job is to write the story in an immersive way. You know, put us in the scene, put us there through the senses, put us there through some descriptive language, whatever it is. But the story is the thing you're trying to communicate, and you're really deliberately removing rhyme. Number 3, a 2-chord song.
Writing a 2-chord song.
Or a 1-chord song.
Or even a 1-chord song, or even a no-chord song. So this was an exercise that I did in one of my first songwriting classes at Berklee with a professor called Scarlet. And one of the first exercises was just that. It was write a whole song that has no more than 2 chords. When you're limited by 2 chords and 2 chords only, you suddenly have to think a lot more about your melody writing, and think about motivic writing and the repetition of elements and the variation of elements. And then very importantly, have to think really deliberately about elements of contrast. So how am I going to move this song to another section when I can't rely on chords to indicate the movement or the structure of a song? So the melody writing aspect became really, really forefront, and it really forced me to think about my melodies and to think about melodic design at a conscious level. And that was massive. And the idea is that, of course, you can add in more chords later, but to have that creative limitation imposed forces the variable of melody to become stronger. And so, you know, it's only through those limitations, and particularly that one, I think was great.
Number 4, writing a song in AABA form.
So this was another Pat Pattison exercise in one of the lyric writing classes at Berkeley. And he showed us a bunch of songs that were in this song form called AABA, which I had never specifically heard of before. But as soon as he showed it to us, realized that it's actually a really common song form and really beautiful because it's a song form with no chorus. So there were a couple of really transformational things about writing in this song form for me. So one thing was the idea that even in a song without a chorus, there still has to be something that is the anchor of the song. And in the AABA song form, it's a refrain line. So there still has to be a centerpiece in the middle of the table of the song.
A repeated line of some kind.
A repeated line of some kind. And the other thing that happens in this song form is when things are distilled like that, you also have to really focus on verse development. So it's this idea that every verse has to progress the idea further and deeper, and the ideas have to gain weight and escalate and intensify, but always relating back to that refrain line. So it also taught me the relationship between verses and the repeating line or section. So it even taught me a lot about writing songs with a chorus, but in a much more distilled way. Yeah.
This is another one of those moments where you look at songs you've been listening to for years, decades, and never realized they were in a particular form or had no rhyme or something like that. There are so many songs that are in this form that you just never thought couldn't not have a chorus.
So there's lots of contemporary examples as well. So the John Mayer song, I'm Gonna Find Another You, for example, is totally an AABA song. Another example is the Elliott Smith song Angeles, which, is a few years old, but it's not like a jazz standard, you know, which I think people who are familiar with AABA songs kind of think of jazz standards, but they're not. It's just a really resilient, flexible, adaptable song form that can be written in any style.
If you want to get out of that habit of just writing verse, chorus, here's a whole other form that'll change your life. Yeah. Number 5, verbs.
So the exercise here is upgrade your verbs, and specifically go through any lyric that you've written, underline all the verbs, and pick at least one verb per section to upgrade.
Why verbs? Why not nouns or adjectives?
So verbs are the powerhouse of the English language. So verbs have the capacity to deliver action, narrative, description, mood, and opinion with one word. So a really good example of this is, it's one thing to say, she walked into the room. But if I take the verb walked and replace it with something more interesting like slithered, and I say she slithered into the room, it totally changes that whole idea, right? That verb is giving me imagery because it is snake related, right? It's giving me action and movement, right? Because it implies the actual movement of that person. It's also giving me a sense of mood or emotion, right? There's only a type of person that we would say slithered into a room.
It's an insight into the persona of that person, as opposed to they walked into the room, really is just giving us the sense they weren't standing still.
Yes.
And nothing more.
So this whole thing reminds me of how other words that aren't verbs can actually weaken an idea. So in this great book that Jeff Tweedy of Wilco wrote this year or last year, How to Write One Song, he has this great example. He says, you don't need to tell anyone the dog barked loudly, because adding loudly to that sentence actually makes the word bark quiet. So to summarize, if this was an exercise, the exercise is upgrade one verb per section, and also, as a secondary exercise, underline any of your adjectives and adverbs and see if you can cut them out.
This idea that we have strong and weak verbs, I think, is really important to just re-emphasize, because I was never aware of this, that some of my verbs were in fact quite weak. I was essentially using verbs that were the equivalent of he walked into the room. And Pat Pattison again brought this to light with his talking about metaphors. and how you construct very powerful metaphors with verbs. And I love that Muhammad Ali example he uses in the book Writing Better Lyrics, where he says Ali avalanched towards his opponents. And as soon as you say Ali avalanched towards his opponents, you get all the power and ferocity of the avalanche being applied to Muhammad Ali. And you really do get struck with the sense of awe, the power. Try and replace that with any other verb, and it's going to feel weaker. Even a verb like lunged, and then you try and qualify it with an adjective, lunged aggressively. Ali lunged aggressively at his opponents, and you go, wow, that's really not doing it for me.
Yes, I think if you've had to use an adverb, it means that the verb wasn't the right verb.
That's a great point. So, 5 exercises that we promise you will change your life. They changed our lives. They continue to change our lives.
Should we summarize them so we can have just like a list?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, number 1, object writing.
Number 2, write a song with no rhymes.
Number 3, write a 1 or a 2 chord song.
Number 4, write a song in an AABA song form, writing from the title first.
Number 5, strengthen your verbs. These are 5 exercises that have changed our lives as songwriters. They continue to change our lives as songwriters. We keep doing them. They're not one-offs. You will love them once you get into the habit of using them.
We are also interested to know if there are any songwriting exercises that have transformed your songwriting practice. So please, if there are any you want to let us know about, reply to us in the comments to this video, or you can also find us on Facebook at the link below.
We will make a video if you tell us about it.
Maybe. I'm time poor.
Okay. I'll try. Do it on my phone.
I'm Keppie.
I'm Benny.
We're 2 friends talking.
Bye.
We'll see you soon.